These are the top 5 Catholic books that you need to own, but you also need to read if you want to become a better Catholic apologist. Now, the scope of this video is going to be in the context of defending your faith against Protestants, okay? That's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, and I have read a lot of books, but these 5 are going to be the most accessible, understandable books for you to read to not only deepen your faith and strengthen your faith, but they are going to equip you with the tools for, when you engage in apologetics. Remember, this is just apologetics towards Protestants, against Protestants, with Protestants, right? These aren't going to really work. I mean, they can. There are elements that can work with other apostolic churches, okay? So some of these books played a role in my conversion to the Catholic faith, but nonetheless, these books are going to serve as like a basis, a foundation for you if you want to be more inundated with, apologetic arguments, okay? Because obviously, Protestants usually cite this verse and that verse and make this argument and that argument, and we're just like, huh? Some of us, not all of us. So, again, these are my top 5, okay? I know there are other top 5s, so you might not agree with them. There might be better ones out there. I don't know, but again, these are my top 5 that I think you should have, and you should also read them cover to cover to deepen your faith and equip you better in the realm of apologetics. All right, so number 5 is Catholicism and Fundamentalism by Karl Keating. If you are aware of that name, he is the founder of Catholic Answers, I believe back in, I could get the date wrong, 86, back in San Diego. You know the story probably. Nonetheless, this book, again, this was one of the books I was reading in the midst of my conversion. I was a Protestant fundamentalist, and there were a lot of things in this book that it went over. It basically went over objections, the Pope, praying to the saints, purgatory, et cetera, et cetera. It covered all the, popular objections that Protestants usually like to cast or use against Catholicism. And Karl Keating does an excellent job of going over them and more or less debunking them. Okay? So let me just read you one quote from this book. Okay? Just give you a little taste, a little flavor from Karl Keating. Again, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, the Attack on Romanism by Bible Christians. Okay? But aren't Catholics Bible Christians too, guys? No. We're Catholic Christians. But nonetheless. Okay. Early on, discuss the history of the Bible. You need to make plain it was the church that formed the Bible, not the Bible that formed the church. Note, too, that the New Testament was not designed as a catechism. That is a huge point. Its various parts were written to people who were already Christian, so it could not have been intended as the sole source of religious teaching. In the beginning, teaching was oral and was under the authority of the church, which eventually decided what books belonged to the Bible and what did not. Okay, that's page 312. That's on the chapter called Practical Apologetics. Again, Catholicism and Fundamentalism by Karl Keating. Again, I highly recommend that book if you want to get started in apologetics or just to deepen your faith. That's a great book. I will tell you a funny story really quickly. So if you guys are familiar with Catholic Answers, the website, I think it's just Catholic.com. Back in the day before 2016, apologists would write tracts. Well, they still write tracts, but they would write tracts, and they would have a comment section that anybody could comment. I think you might have to have logged in or created an account. I can't remember, but anybody. It was like fair game. So you get a lot of arguing and debating, and non-Catholics just spewing all this vitriol and whatnot. But I kid you not, the fall of 2016, this is a true story. It's a little speculative, but I'm just going to throw it out at you. 2016, Karl Keating writes a tract, and it's regarding Pope Francis not answering the dubia the cardinals proposed back in 2016 on Amoris Laetitia. And I can't tell you that, I'd have to bring it up, but he basically ended it by saying, not so merciful for the Jubilee Year of Mercy or whatever, kind of giving a cheap shot at Pope Francis. And then I made a comment to him, because I don't like anybody criticizing the Pope. I don't, especially in public. I don't care who you are. I made a comment to him, and he actually replied, like, okay, all those apologists like never replied, almost. Like you'd get maybe one or two that would, reply here and there. I got the founder of Catholic Answers to reply, but the way he replied, he was pretty mad because I challenged him on some things, and he called my argument facile, and it's one thing to do this, but whatever. But point of the story is, a week later, that comment section no longer existed. Now, was it because of me? I don't know. But yeah, there's been no comment section in the Tracts and Catholic Answers since 2016, the fall of 2016. And that was right around the time I made a few comments to Carl Keating, the founder. And then, yeah, you guys know of Catholic Answers forums. Do you remember those? Oh my gosh, that was a mess. Anyway, so number 5, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, Carl Keating. So, see, him and I, we're still cool, right? Because I'm promoting his book. Hopefully I get some royalties. Number 4, Where We Got the Bible, Our Debt to the Catholic Church by Henry Graham. Again, this played a role in my conversion. Before I converted, I called Dr. David Anders on EWTN, a show called Called to Communion. It's targeted towards non-Catholics. So any non-Catholic can call in and ask questions. And I called in and I said, what is up with the Bible, the canon, and where did we get the Bible? He gave an answer, but he recommended this book, Where We Got the Bible, Our Debt to the Catholic Church. And if you want to know how the canon, developed, and how the translations in different languages and all that, and it's a very easy read. It's only 166 pages, but I really recommend this book because you need to know, again, if you're going to get into apologetics, you need to know how we got the Bible and where we got the Bible. The canon and what's in it and what didn't make it. Okay? And I'll just read you this small snippet from the book, just to give you a little flavor, a little taste. It says, therefore, I say that for people to step in 1,500 years after the Catholic Church had possession of the Bible and to pretend that it is theirs and that they alone know what the meaning of it is and that the Scripture alone, without the voice of the Catholic Church explaining them, are intended by God to be the guide and rule of faith, this is an absurd and groundless claim. Yeah, I agree with that. So obviously, Protestants go by Scripture alone as their sole rule of faith. And it's ironic because the church that doesn't go by Scripture alone gave you that Bible to go by Scripture alone. And you're hijacking this Bible and interpreting it and pretending that you know the meaning and using it against us who gave it to you. Very ironic. But yeah, short read, very easy, very accessible. Yeah, I would recommend reading that book. Number 3. So before Catholic Answers, before the Catholic Catechism, before all that, right, what existed? I mean, the Baltimore Catechism, the Catechism of the Council of Trent. But when it came to apologetics, though, because remember, Catholic Answers, that is like pure apologetics. Hence the name Catholic Answers. But before that was radio replies. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of radio replies. It sounds corny, like radio replies. It just sounds corny, like what? Who listens to the radio? But what I like about this, 2 priests, right? I think this was published in 1940. But 2 priests take all these objections and questions from Protestants, okay? And they go at them in such a philosophical, anthropological, historical, theological way that I don't see going on today anywhere save maybe a few people that do apologetics. Now, I don't claim to be an anthropologist or a historian or a theologian. Well, I'm just not. But I mean, they tackle everything. There are 3 books, so it's like a series of 3 books, okay? And it literally goes almost over everything you could think of in terms of Protestants objecting to the Catholic Church, right? And I just want to read you one quote that I think it's the answer and how it's articulated and formulated that really kind of shines forth, is why I think this book is very valuable. So the category or the topic is on how infants can't believe, like they can't, make an act of faith or assent with their intellect to the revealed truths of God. So therefore, what's up with baptism or the necessity of it if they can't do that. So here's the question. So like I have this book right in front of me, and there are, remember, this is one of 3. There are 1,500 questions. No, I lied. 1,422 questions, objections that these two priests just, oh man, they dunk on these questions. All right. Question 735. How then can they accept Christian faith, infants? That requires belief, and they are incapable of believing in the context of baptism and whatnot. And this is how he replies. The belief of the parents is sufficient here, just as it is sufficient for so much in the natural life. The parents believe on their child's behalf that food is necessary and give it food. They believe that instruction is necessary and give it. They believe what sound morals are necessary and teach the good principles they know. They don't wait for the child to make up its own mind on all these things. Later, the child will know and accept for itself the wisdom of these things. So, what's the argument to that objection? Well, just because the infant's faculties aren't fully developed, right, especially to make an act of faith, an intellectual assent, therefore, the parents shouldn't do anything about it, right? The parents shouldn't make that act of faith on their behalf or, give them the necessary nurturing or tools or whatever before they come to the age of reason. And then he just uses the natural world and logic to point out the kind of error of thinking like, since infants can't believe, then to heck with baptism and their spiritual life, right? Because an infant has just as much right to divine life as they do to natural life, right? Like, why wouldn't they? Makes no sense. So radio replies, again, the two priests, Father Dr. Leslie Rumble, I think that's the Australian priest, and then Father Charles Mortimer. Yeah. Published back in 1940. I don't know if they're out of print. I'm pretty sure you can get them online. But that's Radio Replies. Oh, it's a gem, guys. Trust me. It's so fun to read. Okay. So that was number 3, Radio Replies. So number 5, Catholicism and Fundamentalism. Number 4, where we got the Bible. Number 3, Radio Replies. Again, this is all apologetics, guys. I'm not talking about systematic theology. Okay? I'm not talking philosophy. I'm not talking moral theology, asceticism, or spiritual devotion, or anything like that. Apologetics. Okay. Number 4, Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. I only have the New Testament. So I recommend you getting the Old and New Testament. But I got this, 2 years ago, before they had the Old and New, that literally just came out and weighs about, 300 pounds. But this is so invaluable, guys. This because, as you know, Protestants, right? It's all about the scriptures. They memorize them. They quote them. Scripture this, scripture that, this scripture, that scripture. It's just, they'll just fling them at you. Or they'll come, up with an obscure passage to use against you. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've never heard anyone give a homily on this or expound this to me. Well, I've read, 3 or 4 Bible commentaries, like the whole thing. I think this one's the best, just personally, in terms of apologetics. Remember, it's accessible, it's relatable, it's an easy read, okay? It's not going to confuse you. But yeah, this is put out by Dr. Scott Hahn and Curtis Mitch. When did they come out with this? 2010. 2010. You know, when I was reading this, I thought that Dr. Scott Hahn just did the introduction. And then when I found out he did, you know, the actual commentaries with Curtis Mitch, who's a grad student of his, I'm like, yeah, okay. Now I realize Dr. Scott Hahn just didn't write like, you know, Rome Sweet Home and those other books and give some talks. This dude is a bona fide, legitimate Bible scholar. Like, probably the best. So let me give you a little example, a little flavor, a little taste. So Romans 4, verses 4 and 5, Protestants love to use to try to justify their doctrine or belief of faith alone apart from any kind of works, good works in the life of a Christian, from baptism until natural physical death, right? No good works. It's just pure gift. There are no works. So Romans 4, verse 4 through 5 says, "Now to one who works, his wages are not reckoned as a gift, but as his due. And to the one who does not work, but trusts him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is reckoned as righteousness." So the Protestant will say, well, see right here, and now to one who works, his wages are not reckoned as a gift, but his due. And to the one who does not work, but trusts in him who justifies, that faith is reckoned as righteousness. So basically what they're saying is, faith alone, apart from any type of work, justifies, as this passage says. We don't work for a gift. We don't work for justification, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, this is a really obscure passage. This is really hard because, like, we don't teach faith alone, but it kind of sounds, maybe the Protestants are right. Well, you have this study Bible and you look up it's right below, Romans 4, verse 4, and it gives you a concise, easy to read and understandable explanation of what St. Paul is talking about here. Also, it gives you a synopsis of what the entire letter is all about, which I think people underuse and undervalue. Because you can't just, okay, what's the context, right, of, you know, this chapter? No, you need to know the context of the entire letter. Like, why is St. Paul writing this letter? You know what I'm saying? Okay. So if you go down, it says, chapter 4, verse 4, one who works, right? One who works. So Protestants look at that, says one who works. Okay, it's not to the one who works. So good works are no bueno in justification, right? Because it says that. But to the one who believes, that is imputed or counted as righteousness. Therefore, they get their doctrine of imputation, that forensic justification that covers us but doesn't transform us interiorly. They get that from this verse, among others. So this is what Scott Hahn and Curtis Mitch, among others, has to say about this verse. Pay attention. This is so big. It says, justification is a free gift of grace. Not a wage that is owed on the principle of justice and fair compensation. So what St. Paul is saying is that we can't work for justification as if we earned it and he pays us a wage that is due to us, right? That's all St. Paul is saying. That's all he's saying. This doesn't teach faith alone or imputation. He's just saying, hey, you Christians at Rome, you Jews specifically, but some Gentiles, you got the law of Moses and you're circumcised and you're descendants of Abraham. Yeah, that means nothing. Okay? You have no claim to justification. And you can't work based on the law of Moses and put God in a position to owe you like he's your employee. Remember, it's a gift. But that doesn't mean that encapsulates all future, justification and good works and, persevering and fighting your flesh and praying and all that. It doesn't mean that. It just means when you initially become a Christian, you can't earn it. You can't get a wage for the work that you put in. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, New Testament, Second Catholic Edition, RSVD. I do recommend just getting the old and the new. I do, because I'm sure it's amazing. Yeah. Okay, last one, number 1. You guys know what it is? I mean, how can it not be, right? You think it's the Bible? It's not the Bible. What do you think? What do you think? Yes, Harry Potter. No. The Catechism of the Catholic Church. I'm sure a lot of you guys have it. You need to read it. Okay, I've read it 2.5 times. I'm not boasting. Once I had to read it. Or actually, the 1.5 times I had to read it, and then the other time I read it on my own. But you have got to read the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It is just the most comprehensive statement of our faith, I think. I'm pretty sure. Okay? And then it encapsulates tradition, lives of the saints, ecumenical councils, scripture, popes and their encyclicals and exhortation, just all this. It's just, and you guys know this. So you got to have it. You got to read it. Read it. I know Father Mike Schmish is doing Catechism in a year, right? There's a good way to get the Catechism. I don't know if you're more of a visual learner, like reading or audio, if that helps you, but I'll read you a little quote, little flavor and taste. Paragraph 773 on the church. I love this. So Mary goes before us all in the holiness that is the church's mystery as the bride without spot or wrinkle. This is why the Marian dimension of the church precedes the Petrine. You ever say or hear the saying, he or she is more Catholic than the Pope? Mary's more Catholic than the Pope. I hate to break it to you. She precedes any Petrine authority. Or not authority, but just the Petrine dimension, right? That paternal dimension. Remember, the church is a mother. That maternal dimension precedes the Petrine dimension. So Mary precedes everyone, especially in terms of not just her divine maternity, but in her discipleship. So those are my 5. Agree, disagree, like, hate, whatever. I don't know. Make some comments. Maybe there's some better ones. But again, this is just to get you started, right? And hopefully you guys can get off your feet with these books and learn some stuff. And it'll help you in your dialogues and discourses with our Protestant brothers and sisters. So those are my 5. Just to reiterate, number 5 was Catholicism and Fundamentalism by Carl Keating. Number 4, Where We Got the Bible. That was by Henry Graham. Number 3, Radio Replies by the 2 priests. Can't remember their name. Number 4, the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. The New Testament, but you should get the Old. And then number 1 is the Catholic Catechism. Those 5 will equip you and edify you for apologetics. Okay? Comment below of what you think might be better on that same baseline, of just getting started with apologetics. Yeah, do that. Okay? Thanks for watching. Love you guys. Praise be Jesus and Mary.